right, guys, it's Monday. It's my favorite way to kick off the week. It's Metagame Monday. Before we get into today's show, let me quickly talk about the 8 guys that I have freshly updated during the weekend, just in time for Eternal Weekend Asia, or, you're playing in the showcase, or you simply just want to crush your next Legacy tournament. These 75s are tested, tournament-winning decks, and I've added all my thoughts, my sideboard plans against the top 20 decks of the field. What's not to like? We have a little bit of tempo, a little bit of reanimator, a little bit of control, a little bit of aggro, a little bit of show and tell. We have something for everybody. Thank you so much for your time. And now let's get into the show. Metagame Monday this week, as you can see, has 48 decks instead of 40. This is because there were 5 challenges, but I also hosted a European Legacy Masters qualifier for my members and guests. So we actually have 5 top 8s to digest today. And with the new kind of philosophy revolving around the foil copies being the decks from the finals, let's try and continue with that today. And look at this. This is all over the shop. So we have Eldrazi Aggro, we have Black-White Energy, we have Smallpox, Oops All Spells, Dimir Tempo, Tempo Doomsday, Omniscience ×2, Sneak Attack for a third show and tell strategy, placing highly this weekend. Then we have a copy of Is It Delver Cutter, we have a couple of Death and Taxes, and then we have basically Mystic Forge with Paradoxical Outcome. So when we place these, let's see, Graveyard, Tempo, Combo, Tempo, Loam, I guess, Creatures, Combo, Stompy. When we place these, we now get to learn a little bit more about the categories of decks. This is something that I learned 12 years ago when reading a lot of SCG articles about Modern, where in Modern, if there are 15 playable decks, how can you possibly build a good sideboard? And then I think it was Erilax, maybe. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. But an author over there basically said that, well, you can just see Infect and Zoo as the same deck. It's a creature deck. You can just see Titan and Tron as the same deck. They're big mana decks, and we kind of make these control, big mana, mid-range, go wide, whatever, crossovers, and this way we can basically narrow it down to, and then maybe we need some targeted hate for affinity, but everything else is like crossover in our sideboard. Anyway, that's just to say that this is the name of the game in Legacy right now. Right now, we don't know if the opponent's playing Oops or Fast Reanimator. Well, we need Graveyard Hit against both, so the specifics isn't that important. Of course, it's nice that our, consigned to memory or what have you has better overlap against Reanimator, but you get the picture here. Graveyard is pretty low at the moment. I'm playing a stock of 2 Surgicals in all of my decks. I think that's plenty to handle this amount of Oops All Spells and Fast Reanimator. When you're running this amount, these decks can actually still win tournaments. So let's imagine everybody ran 3 or 4, then these decks would be in big trouble. But that's the thing about metagame decks in Magic, where you're basically trying to prey on the fact that the opponent cannot, justify running a ton of cards, right? So yeah, sure, you have the tools, but are you going to do it? So it's kind of this eye-staring contest. And I must say I really like it, because if people sleep at the wheel, these decks will win tournaments. Next column here is Tempo, and as you can see here, it's incredibly close. I believe this Katara deck, yeah, that was an Esper version, so you could even put that here under Blue-Black X, and then say it's completely even here between Blue-Red Tempo and Blue-Black. I've talked about this dynamic a lot before, where into the unknown, you want to play Is It. Once the metagame is established, you can build your Dimir deck better. Now you know if Hymn to Torag is good. Now you know if Spellbomb is necessary. Now you know if Bowmasters is good. And if you build your deck right, you can even prey on the little brother here of Blue-Red Tempo. So pretty exciting times. I love these decks. I'll be revisiting especially Blue-Black in the near future, now that I know more about the metagame. Katara has kind of yet to catch on. I love my Dimir version of that deck. I think it's super viable. I even played it in an LCQ this past week. I got stopped cold in round 4 by the Is It matchup. And yeah, I think that deck is viable. It's just very important that we're used to this, Tameo, Arcanist, Frog. And it's just very important to understand that those cards are insane, this card is viable, right? So there's a little bit of a thing called language there. Next column here is combo, and this is the big one, as you can see. Combo is super big, so by definition, that makes cards like Thoughtseize, Hymn to Torak, Force Negation simply just really, really strong. You can even argue a card like Flusterstorm would be good in the current metagame. Look at all of these combo decks. It's essentially only bad against the 2 artifact-based ones. So if you're going to be playing against Doomsdays and Show and Tells and Stock Ups and Beseech the Mirror, Infernal Tutor all day, Flusterstorm could be a good one to consider if you have a bad combo matchup or you need a little bit of a little bit of help to get there. I want to talk a little bit about the Doomsday deck. The Doomsday deck has been mainly pioneered by Eureka. I see lots of players basically following his trends. We're playing main deck Bowmasters. We're playing Wasteland. We're running a pretty thick Plan B, Murktides, Baragoyves, Tamios. So I think nailing how to play against this deck is currently the deck's biggest strength. The fact that people haven't done that is. You sit there with Full Negation, you lose to Baragoy. If you sit there with Fatal Push, you lose to Doomsday. That kind of dynamic is very similar to the one we know from Blue-Black Reanimator, back when Entomb was legal. And if you can get over the finish line with your fair plan, while having a strong game 1 against any non-Force of Will deck, yeah, this deck is certainly viable. So I love to see it do well. Sneak Attack is back. We haven't seen that in a while. The card Sneak Attack is a card that doesn't backfire out of that deck. In theory, Show and Tell could backfire in any mirror match. I will say, if you put Omniscience into play and you have any kind of follow-up, you should be in good shape. I guess what you're losing to is the opponent having a Traxa, drawing into some counter magic, then stopping your 1 action card, untapping and winning, something along those lines. But in general, I like the Omniscience versions better. I think they're incredible right now. I like the green version myself. I don't really want to get Thoughtseize and Hymn if I can help it. Then we have a couple of Ritual Classic Storm decks here. Pretty sweet to see. We have the Beseech the Mirror package, Gaia's Will, Song of Creation. We're trying to find this critical mass of rituals in action after clearing the way with discard spells. It's cool that this deck is viable. I don't see it being a tier 1 deck anytime soon, but I see it placing in the top 8s, and that's darn good. Then we have a couple of artifact decks. The Mystic Forge deck here hasn't really been trending well into the new metagame. If the default deck is a tempo and people think that decks like Doomsday and Show and Tell are great, all of a sudden the Mystic Forge deck doesn't have much, shine to it, because you're either going to be playing against Daze, Wasteland, Force of Will every round with a fast clock, or you're going to be playing against combo decks that now has Force of Will. So you basically need to prey on decks in the next column here, the creature column. So Mole Badger Cub makes a Cradle Control deck way more viable, which is cool to see. And the player who plays top 4 at Eternal Weekend Europe now has injected even more hope into the white creature aficionados of Legacy. The black-white version is surprisingly versatile, and if you can nail the sideboard for the right weekend, this deck is going to be putting up even more top 8s. This pile generally wants to prey on the fact that tempo is on top of the food chain. In a perfect world, tempo controls the combo decks, so you don't have to play against that many combo decks, but for the time being, the creature decks are a little bit of a, let's call it a matchup roulette. Next up, we have Control. Control is always something that I'm eager to follow. I believe one of these is Grixis Wizards and one is Jeskai Wizards. I do love those. Rock solid mana base. Great answers. I added Murktides Regent to those to have a little bit of closing power. That's something that the Beanstalk decks have been running for a while. I think it's very hard to build your Beanstalk deck. I have yet to really find a list where I'm like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. I might work on it in the near future. I do love that strategy. It has a very, very near and dear place in my heart after the showcase win last year, where I built a Beanstalk deck for the 30-person tournament and ended up taking that down, qualifying for the Mox, qualifying for the Pro Tour, all of that jazz. So, yes, very special card to me. Blue Cloud Post, a little bit surprising. I would have guessed that this would at least be 3 or 4 copies. Dimir Cloud Post is a deck that kind of found its final form pretty early, so I've been a little bit critical, or at least pointing out that this there probably isn't that much innovation to be done in this deck. And I'm, of course, willing to be proven wrong by the dedicated pilots that I talk about over and over. I think they did an awesome job with the deck. I think the deck is perfectly fine. But then, of course, you can get crushed if you play against, the show and tell decks are fast, or the doomsday decks are fast, or, the tempo decks have Price of Progress and a million wastelands. You can find yourself between a rock and a hard place where there aren't that much, let's call it classic mid-range to prey on. Next up here, we have a little bit of a resurgence here with Loam decks, Loam Wasteland decks, lands, and pox, essentially trying to deny its opponent resources. Those decks are always cool to have around. Essentially, these decks, and to some extent Mono Red Prison, they kind of make sure that people aren't playing these 3-color tempo decks or 3-color decks that much. I mean, we have a little bit of Beanstalk. Everything else here, I believe, has pretty solid mana, and that is a nod to these decks. So as long as these decks put up this kind of numbers, I don't think we should be playing too many colors in our decks. Just too big of a liability against Loam Wasteland. Last up, we have the runner-up from Eternal Weekend Europe. I forgot to mention the Affinity deck is, of course, represented here. It won Eternal Weekend, still hasn't done all of that much. It's still sitting as a role player in the metagame. And it actually was a Chalice deck, the one that won Eternal Weekend. I personally don't like the Chalices. I like to be attacking and having more blue count, but that's a talk for another day. The Eldrazi Aggro deck is just super solid choice. You can get in trouble if you lose too many die rolls, but you can also just run people over. You can make Force of Will completely irrelevant with your caverns. And you can go wide and tussle with the best of them. I even had a turn 2 kill on camera. I think I missed it by 1 or 2 damage, but there was a turn 2 kill available, which is pretty insane to think about from an aggro deck. So yeah, Glaring Flestraker and Kozilek's Command certainly are good Magic cards. Well, last message from me here is probably that if you're playing Legacy in the coming week, I think you should be looking at tempo and you should be looking at combo, and you need to feel very comfortable at least against one of them. And I suggest that you have an even-Steven matchup against the other pile. So let's say you're crushing combo and you're even against tempo, or vice versa. I think you're in a great spot. And then you do have to consider these creature decks and what can your colors do to not just get run over or by these go wide strategies. It is a little bit annoying that these small sweepers aren't very good against the Eldrazi deck. I would love to if we could play a card that was good against all of these decks at the same time, but that's not always going to be the case. What is going to be the case is I'm going to send you guys off now. As always, I love to have you here. I hope to see you back soon on the channel. Check out the Metafy if you want access to all my guides, all my tournaments, giveaways, community, and all of that jazz. And yeah, I hope to see you back soon. Thanks so much for watching.